It was a Thursday, Wimbledon, the most famous stretch of grass in the world, and the future Queen of England walked right past the royal box. She did not sit down. She walked toward the public queue instead, the ordinary line where people sleep on the pavement all night for a single ticket. And she got behind the desk, and she started handing those tickets out herself. Catherine, Princess of Wales, in a pale blue suit, doing the one thing this family spent 30 years terrified of, the common touch, Diana's gift, the touch they feared. And here is the part nobody said out loud that afternoon. Now look, the cameras made it a nice story. Future Queen, lovely and warm, meets the fans. That is the version the palace is very happy for you to keep. But if you lived through the last 30 years of this family, you saw something else standing behind that ticket desk. You saw a ghost, because we have watched this exact scene before, in another decade worn by another woman, and back then the palace did not clap. Back then they were frightened of it. Let me take you back, because you cannot understand this Thursday without it. There was a young woman who married into this family in 1981. She was 20 years old, and she had something none of them were trained to do. She could walk into a room and make the least important person in it feel like the only one. She sat on the beds of dying men when the world was terrified to touch them. She took her boys to fast food counters and theme park queues on purpose, so they would know what the rest of us know. She shook hands without gloves. She knelt down to a child's height. Small things, human things, the things none of the others would do. And they did fear it. That is not me being dramatic, that is the record. The warmer she got with the public, the colder the palace got with her. Because a monarchy runs on distance. It runs on the idea that these people are set apart, above, behind the glass. And here was a woman melting the glass with her bare hands, and every time she did it, the crowds outside loved her a little more and trusted the men in grey a little less. She was not breaking the rules of protocol. She was breaking the spell. And an institution that lives on a spell does not forgive the person who breaks it. You know how that story ended. It was August of 1997, a tunnel in Paris, and a life gone at 36. 2 boys woke up without a mother, and one of them was made to walk behind her coffin at 15, while the whole world watched him not be allowed to cry. I want you to hold that boy in your mind, because he matters to this Thursday too. We will come back to him. Here is my first honest thought, and I will mark it clearly as mine. For years I assumed the palace won that fight. Diana was gone. The men in grey were still there. The machine rolled on. That is what it looked like. But watch what that machine is doing now in 2026, and tell me who actually won. Because the institution did not bury Diana's method with her. It could not afford to. It went and found the method again, and it dressed it in a sky blue suit, and it put it back to work at Wimbledon. Make of that what you will, but you do not resurrect the thing you defeated. You resurrect the thing you cannot survive without. Stay with me, because the timing of all of this is what I genuinely cannot get past. Let us talk about the woman behind the desk. Catherine is the patron of the All England Club, so being at Wimbledon is, on paper, just her job. But this was not a normal year, and this was not a normal appearance. This was her first time at the opening week of that tournament since 2023. You know why there was a gap? She spent a large part of the last 2 years fighting for her own health out of the public eye, and the country held its breath for her the way it has not held its breath for a royal in a long time. So when she came back, she did not have to do anything but sit and wave. The safe move, the palace move, was the box. Smile from behind the glass. Distance. She chose the queue instead. She walked to the line of ordinary people who had camped overnight, and she stood with them, and she got behind the ticket desk and did the volunteer's job for a while. She spoke to the stewards who give up their days for free. She sat down next to Andy Murray, a man who has actually lifted that trophy like she was any other fan who got a good seat. Sky blue suit, no glass, and I want you to notice what that is, because it is not nothing. That is the exact grammar of Diana. The deliberate step down from the platform, the choosing of the least important person in the room, 30 years later, to the letter. Now the palace would like you to read this as a lovely coincidence, a warm young woman being warm, and maybe that is all it is. I cannot climb inside her head, and I will not pretend to. But here is the thing about this family. Nothing this visible is an accident. These appearances are planned, staged, photographed, and released on purpose. Somebody decided the future queen should be seen doing the one thing the institution once treated as a threat, and that decision tells you something the palace will never say in a statement. It tells you they learned the hard way over an open grave. They learned that the distance does not save them anymore. The glass does not save them. The only thing that saves a modern monarchy is the very warmth they once tried to manage out of Diana. So they stopped fighting it. They started teaching it. The touch they feared has become the touch they depend on. And here is where it gets colder, and here is where I stop being sentimental, because if Diana's gift is now the throne survival plan, then somebody had to be chosen to carry it, and the choosing is where the knife is. Think about who is standing where in this family right now. Catherine carries the warmth, and she carries the tiara, and she will one day carry the crown as the wife of the man who is next, Diana's own line, running straight through her elder son to the throne. That is the picture the palace wants on your screen. The heir, the heir's wife, the warmth, the continuity. clean. And notice how carefully that picture was assembled, because it did not happen by luck. Let me walk you through the real machinery, because this is where the patience of it shows. Start with the man beside her, the one who is next. William inherited the Duchy of Cornwall in September of 2022, the day his grandmother died and his father became king. That is the estate that funds the heir, an old feudal money engine that passes by blood and only by blood. And he did not just sit on it. He has spent the time since remaking it, quietly, in a direction that would have made his mother nod, handing income back to a community here, foregoing rent there, turning a machine his ancestors ran for profit into something with a conscience bolted on. Slow, methodical, cold in the execution, warm in the aim. That is not an accident of temperament. That is a boy who watched what the press and the palace did to a warm woman, and decided he would carry the warmth, but never again be caught without the power. He learned both halves of his mother's lesson. Catherine wears the touch in public. William builds the fortress in private. Together they are the whole of Diana, rebuilt and made safe. Now put a second fact beside that. The tiara. When Diana died, there was a real question, unspoken but real, about who would inherit her place, her jewels, her standing in the family. And the answer, worked out over years, is written every time this family gathers for a state occasion. It is Catherine who steps out in the pieces that carry Diana's memory, Catherine at the head of the women, Catherine in the position that once might have gone elsewhere. The jewels skipped a generation. It did not settle on the woman Diana called the third person in her marriage. It travelled down the bloodline, past Camilla, to the wife of Diana's son. That is not me inventing a slight. That is the seating plan of every royal event you have watched for a decade. The message is in who stands where. And then the consequence nobody had to manufacture, because this family manufactured it for real. Andrew, the king's own brother, stripped of his honours, stripped of his standing, and in 2026 pulled into a criminal investigation and arrested. The man who once seemed the most untouchable of them all, gone from the balcony, gone from the working family, left clinging to the very edge of the walls. You want to know whether consequence ever reaches inside these gilded rooms. It reached him. It reached a son of a queen. So when this family decides someone is a liability, the record shows it does not always protect them forever. Hold that thought, because it cuts more than one way, and we are coming back to the two brothers. Now look at who is not in that picture. Because the same week Catherine was handing out tickets at Wimbledon, being the warm public face of this family, Diana's other son was back in this country and could not get in the door. That is not a metaphor. Harry was in Britain that week, and the palace accommodation he was offered was withdrawn before he arrived. His children were kept an ocean away over a security fight the state refused to settle. He came home and the family that stages warmth for the cameras had, for him, no room. Two sons of the same mother, one family's warmth on full display through the daughter-in-law, and a shut door for the blood. Sit with that contrast, because it is the whole episode. Here is the touch they feared, alive and glowing at Wimbledon, worn by the woman they chose. And here is the son who came from the woman who invented it, standing outside the walls in the same 7 days. That is what I mean when I say the palace did not defeat Diana. It sorted her. It kept the parts of her it could use, and it distanced the parts it could not control. The warmth, the common touch, the melting of the glass, all of that got promoted, put in a blue suit, sent to the front of the queue, and the harder, more difficult inheritance, the son who inherited her anger at the press as much as her tenderness, the son who fights the newspapers in court the way she never got to, that inheritance got left at the gate. Here is what I think, and I will say plainly that it is what I think. The institution made a choice about which kind of Diana it wanted to survive into the next reign. It wanted the smile without the storm. It wanted the hand on the child's shoulder without the woman who said out loud that there were 3 people in her marriage. It wanted the queue at Wimbledon and not the interview that shook the throne. And it found a way to have exactly that. It is a brilliant piece of management, honestly. It is also a quietly brutal one. And there is one more figure standing in the shadow of that Wimbledon photograph, and we should say her name because the contrast is the whole point. Camilla. She is the queen now, crowned beside Charles. In May of 2023, the title she waited a lifetime for. She won the marriage, she won the title, she won the crown. And here is the thing this audience understands in its bones, the thing the palace would rather you not dwell on. A consort's role belongs to the reign, not to the person. It is not blood. It is not owned. It is held for as long as the marriage and the reign last, and no longer. When the reign ends, the crown moves to the next by blood, and the warmth of this family, the future of it, the touch the country actually loves, sits with Catherine and the line that runs through Diana's son. Camilla holds the title today, but she was never given the thing that cannot be taken back, because that thing passes by blood, and it passed her by. I want to be careful and honest here, because this is interpretation, and I will mark it as mine. I cannot see inside that marriage or that household, but you do not need to read a single private thought to see the structure of it. The structure is public. The structure is in the succession itself. What is borrowed gets returned, And when you set the woman who holds the borrowed title against the woman who carries the bloodline's warmth into the future, you are looking at the long defeat of everything Diana was told to fear, and the long vindication of everything she was. And Charles, the king in the middle of all this, the man who once confessed on national television in 1994, the man who married the woman Diana wept over. He is older now, and he has been fighting his own illness in public since early 2024, and the power in this family is visibly, steadily flowing past him toward his elder son. That is not a coup, and I am not saying it is one. It is just time and blood and the way this machine moves. But watch it move. The warmth is being installed in the next generation. The money engine is being remade by the air. The old grievances of the 90s are quietly being outlived by the very people they wounded. Diana's boy is being handed the future, and Diana's method is being handed to his wife. And the people who caused the wound are aging out of the story one by one. Let me slow down, because I can feel myself getting sharp, and this next part deserves care. I am not saying Catherine is a copy or a puppet or anything unkind. From everything on the public record, the warmth looks real. A woman does not walk into an overnight queue and sit with strangers convincingly if she despises it. I think she means it, and that is exactly why it works, and exactly why it matters. Diana's method only ever worked because it was sincere, and the palace could never fake sincerity, so it had to find someone who actually had it. It found her. The point is not that Catherine is pretending. The point is what the institution is doing with something real. It is taking a genuine gift, and it is using that gift to do the thing Diana's warmth was never allowed to do while she was alive. Reassure the country that the monarchy is soft and kind and one of us. Royal reporting depends on access, so read the official warmth with that in mind. When the palace lets a picture out, the palace wants something from that picture, and what it wants from this one is obvious the second you set it beside the shut door. It wants you looking at the woman in blue, at Wimbledon, and not at the man who could not get to bed in his own grandmother's old house. Now, here is the part most channels get wrong about this whole story, so stay with me. They tell you it is a rivalry, Catherine-versus-Meghan, the good one and the bad one, warmth versus Hollywood. That framing is lazy, and it is beneath what is actually happening. This is not two women. This is one dead woman's inheritance being split in two, and the palace choosing which half to keep. Diana was both things at once. She was the tenderness that sat with the sick, and she was the fury that went on television and told the truth about how she was treated. She was the Q, and she was the war. You cannot have Diana without both. But the institution can only survive one of them. It can survive the Q. It cannot survive the war. So it took the Q and it gave it to Catherine, And it took the war and it exiled it in Harry, and it told you they were opposites. They were never opposites, they are two halves of the same mother. And let me stay on the war half for a moment, because the sun at the gate is not idle out there. And this is where I feel the whole thing most. Think about what Harry has actually spent these last years doing. He has been in courtrooms, not one, but a run of them, taking the British newspaper industry to court over how it gathered stories, over the hacking and the snooping and the deception, the exact machinery that made his mother's life a hunt. He beat the publisher of the Mirror. He forced a reckoning with the publisher of the Sun. And this very week another of those cases, the one against the publisher of the Mail, came to its judgment day in a London court, the ruling handed down while he was back on British soil. I am not going to tell you the outcome as if I know it, because the careful thing is to wait for it to be fully read and understood. But understand what he is doing regardless of any single result. He is fighting the press that hunted Diana, in court, under oath, putting his own name and his own privacy on the line to do it. That is the other half of his mother, the fury she took onto television in 1995, and he took it into a courtroom instead. So here is the split laid out plain, and it is brutal in its symmetry. One son married a woman who carries Diana's tenderness into the future Queen's role, and the palace showcases it at Wimbledon. The other son carries Diana's war against the press into the High Court, and the palace shuts its door on him the same week. The warmth gets a photo call. The fight gets a withdrawn invitation. And both of them are doing exactly what their mother did. That is what should stop you cold. They are not opposites. They are obedient, both of them, to the same woman. One inherited her hands. The other inherited her voice. And this family has decided it can only afford the hands. And that, to me, is the real story of that Thursday at Wimbledon. Not a nice outing, a decision made visible. The touch they feared kept and crowned in one child's household, and shut outside the gate in the others. Let me give you the thing I keep turning over, the moment I cannot let go of. There is old footage, and if you are around my age, you have seen it, of Diana taking her boys out into the ordinary world on purpose. Not a state visit, not a photo call she wanted. Just a mother deciding her sons would know what a normal queue felt like, what a normal counter felt like, what it was to stand in line like everyone else. She did that because she believed it would make them better men and better kings. She was building something into them with her own hands, quietly, against the grain of everything the palace wanted. 30 years on, look what stuck. Her elder son's wife walks into an overnight queue at Wimbledon and stands in it like she belongs there. The lesson took. The touch survived. It survived Paris. It survived the men in grey. It survived 30 years. It is standing behind a ticket desk in a blue suit. She lost her life at 36 and she still won the argument. about what this monarchy has to be. That is the shareable truth of this, and I want you to hold it. They did not beat her. They became her in the parts they could use. But I promised you the colder turn, and here it is, because a warm ending would be a lie. If the throne now runs on Diana's warmth, then the throne has admitted something it will never say. It has admitted she was right, and they were wrong. Every grey man who managed her, briefed against her, treated her softness as a problem to be contained. Every one of them was proven wrong the moment the institution had to go back and dig her method up and put it to work to save itself. That is a verdict. Nobody read it out. Nobody had to. The blue suit at Wimbledon read it for them. And here is the second, harder verdict, the one about the door. You do not get to keep half of a person. You do not get to promote the tenderness and exile the anger, and call yourself whole. The institution took Diana's warmth and installed it in the future queen, and it took Diana's fight and left it standing in the cold outside, a withdrawn invitation. It thinks it has solved her. It has not, because the son at the gate is not going away, and the fight he inherited from her is not going away. And one day this family is going to have to reckon with the fact that you cannot honour a woman's gift in one child while shutting the door on the other and pretend the two are unconnected. They are the same inheritance. They came from the same mother. And the door will have to open, or the contradiction will keep sitting there in plain sight, the way it sat there this week. Warmth on one screen and a shut door on the other. I could be wrong about a great deal of this. I cannot tell you what any of them feel. No one outside that family can. But the pictures do not lie about what was chosen. One son's household glowing at Wimbledon, the other son outside the walls. Same week, same mother. You connect it. So here is where I leave it. Diana walked into ordinary queues so her boys would understand ordinary people. This week, one of her son's wives walked into an ordinary queue at Wimbledon, and the whole country melted, and the palace was thrilled, and it was beautiful, and it was Diana's, every inch of it. The touch they feared became the touch they crowned. She has been gone for 29 years, and she is still the most powerful woman in that family, because the future of the throne is now built out of the exact gift they once tried to take away from her. They spent a decade trying to manage her warmth out of the story. They are going to spend the next reign living on it. Tell me something before you go. Tell me what you remember about Diana in a queue, in a crowd, with her hands out, no glass between her and you. Tell me the moment she made you believe she actually cared. Because I think you saw it on a Thursday at Wimbledon this week, worn by someone else, and I want to know if you saw it too. I read every comment.